So true.
Welcome back, guys.
Hi.
Today we're doing a Q&A episode. So we have some questions that people have asked, and we're going to answer them to the best of our abilities.
We're answering the people's questions.
I haven't...
All 5 of them.
Yeah, all 5 of them. I haven't looked at any of them, so I'm completely unprepared. Shooting from the hip.
Okay.
We'll see what happens.
We have our question reader in our board and training trainer, Senni. Hi, guys!
All right, so should we start?
Yeah.
All right, so first question, it says, how do you refocus / grab your dog's attention back if they're easily distracted?
It's a good one.
I think that is probably... There's a lot of variables in this, but just taking that question at like face value and assuming we have just a very generic, distracted dog, and we're not dealing with any like underlying like more intense behavioral issues like reactivity or things like that. I think that you can come at something like that from both angles. The first angle I would go to is going back a couple steps and building a little bit more engagement with your dog and their desire to want to be with you. And I think that if you have the ability to start something like that from a really young age, that's your best bet. So if you have a young puppy, the best thing you can do is take them to a bunch of different environments and don't allow them to engage with the environment. They are just simply there to observe and focus on you and use like a ton of really high value treats and food and play and things like that. And that's the best way to create like a very neutral dog from the beginning. If you're starting with a dog who's older, who you don't really have the luxury of building from ground zero, then you can obviously come at it by doing engagement exercises and working with the dog. And honestly, that can be as simple as like teaching that when the dog looks at you, they get food. And working on marking and rewarding that, and then taking it to those distracting places and working on it more. You can also implement corrections for breaking like physical positions. So if the dog understands like a sit or a down command, you can put them in position. When they get so distracted that they break that position, you can deliver a correction. And so basically they learn that if they pay attention and they focus, they get really good stuff. And if they don't pay attention and focus, they also will get a correction. You kind of meet it on both ends, and you can build engagement in that way as well too. Just kind of hone their focus.
I think it's also good to have a really good foundation before you go out in the public. So a lot of the times people jump the gun a little bit, and we take our dogs to parks, breweries, coffee shops without really having that solid, like if we're using some of our obedience commands like our come, our down, and our sit, sometimes they're a little bit sloppy. And we should note that if we can't even get the dog to do something successfully in our house, like holding down stay or sit stay when we're eating dinner or when we're relaxing, we can't possibly expect to take our dog to a much more stimulating environment and expect them to do well. So it's like if we do have the time to have that be a slower process, that's great. And that being said, when your dog is ready and you feel like the commands are looking good at home, we're often going to see a little bit of a transitional period when we're taking them out because there's so much more to deal with. My best bet is like simplify things. So there's a lot of people that are trying to like hold treats in front of the dog's face and constantly get the dog to make eye contact. And my goal is to teach my dog neutrality in the environment. So nothing is so exciting and nothing is going to be too scary for them. So if I'm doing things the first time, I may create distance from people and objects and dogs and just start with something like, we're going to walk around the park and you're going to stay in your heel. We'll simplify it. Then we'll move on to our downs, ensuring that they can hold the down and that our process is exactly the same as we do it at home. You break your down, your sit, you're getting that correction, and we're putting you back down. Like you said, we can positively use food. If we're really focused on dogs and people and they turn to look at us, we can mark and reward then. So kind of making sure you put in the work before you go out into public would be the best case scenario.
Yeah. And it's funny because I feel like depending on the dog's age, I think sometimes the obedience is important or it isn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's
Sure.
like, I feel like with young dogs,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people make the mistake of waiting too long
Mm-hmm.
because they feel like the dog does need to have like sits and leash walking and all of this really, you know, strict obedience to be able to function well in environments like that. Because really when the dog is really young, so like I'll take Snoop as an example, like when I took him out places, he didn't know anything other than mom has food.
Mm-hmm.
That's all he knew and that's all he cared about. And so my focus on him when he was young in that like 11 week to 20 week period, honestly, was like just a ton of food and exposure to a lot of different things and being very mindful of what I reinforced and what I didn't, and trying to like expand his world as big as possible and allow him to experience things while still giving him like the mental stability, you know, to go behind it. But I do think that if you're past that very like moldable, almost fragile to a certain degree, like mindset in a young puppy, and you hit 6, 7, 8 months old, then yes, at that point, the benefit to the imprinting stage, you're kind of beyond it. You know what I mean? Like they're who they're gonna be at that point. And if you have a really crazy, chaotic puppy, it is probably best to like get a little bit of control before you go into those environments. But I do think that sometimes people with young puppies put a lot of pressure on themselves of like, my dog has to know sit and this and this. And I'm like, your 10-week-old puppy doesn't need to know shit. Yeah. They just need to like care that you exist and think you're the coolest thing in the world. And everything else will just kind of like naturally fall into place at that point.
Yeah, I did a lot of like the same kind of session with Pip when she was a puppy. We just go to like breweries and coffee shops and things. And the expectation wasn't that she held a rigid sit, and I was being super picky with her because she was still such a development stage that I wanted to teach her just to accept like, we went to a lot of softball games and just watching and hearing the sounds. I wasn't gonna let her like go after people or go toward people, but we just sat there and she was like,
the expectation was just like, just be chill and hang out.
Yeah.
And like just having food with you and like being mindful enough to catch those moments where like you're standing in line to get ice cream and your puppy's looking at everything and then they go, hey, what's up, mom? And you go, good. You know, and you give food and they're like, oh, that's cool. And then all of a sudden they're doing that, you know, like every 10 seconds, every time they look at something, they check in with you and you just kind of build that over time.
Yeah, I think it's very much up to the owner to like kind of wording this properly, like earn your dog's focus. Like you have to put in the steps to earn your dog's focus and make yourself something your dog wants to check in. So if I'm constantly micromanaging and screaming and yelling at my dog, why the hell would they want to engage?
Yeah, like you have to be somebody your dog enjoys being around.
Yeah.
You know, they have to like you. Yeah. And I find that like, I see a lot of people that like, your dog listens to you, but does your dog like you? Yeah. Are they having like a good time listening to you? You know, and again, that sounds like I would be like a very like soft owner and like trainer, and I'm not. I'm very like firm with my dogs when I have to be, but like they like me. I'm fun. You know, I'm very fun and like enjoyable for them in the periods where that is appropriate and that is allowed, but they also know that there's like very strict boundaries that like I hold them to and they can't cross that either.
Yeah, I think like something I've been exploring in group class a lot is practicing a little bit of stillness within the session. So I have a group of dogs, and at some point in the hour group session we do a down or a sit and we just kind of hang out and talk. And I think that is so important. People skip over just kind of chilling with your dog and allowing them to intake the environment. They don't necessarily have to be in a command to do so, but don't rule out how important it is just to like stay in one spot and have your dog kind of accept just being in that one spot.
Yeah.
And like not crying and whining and scratching you and jumping at everybody. Like teach them how to be calm.
Yeah. And I would also like, can you read the question one more time?
How do you refocus / grab your dog's attention back to you if they're easily distracted?
And I would even, I mean, I would also look at that, and of course I have to see exactly what the person is referencing, but I would also be like, do they need to 100% pay attention to you all the time?
Yeah.
Like, in what context is this happening? What issues are you having because of that? Because, like, if the dog is just like, oh, I heard something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, whatever.
They don't have to stare at you the whole time. And there's like this like new wave dog training that's like your dog has to make perfect eye contact with you whenever you say like, fluffy, fluffy. And then you see people like repeating and repeating. And the dog is like, I'm so mentally exhausted from having to check in with you all the time that I don't want to. So if we can create that naturally, like, and really have our dogs want to look at us.
Yeah, they like want to.
Yeah.
We're not demanding it. They just like want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that can be really helpful.
Yeah, so I would say probably like if I was going to directly give homework to like somebody that asked me that, I give recently, it's funny that you said that you started doing more stillness and stuff, because I've also had like a wave of dogs that really would benefit from, I have people, I'm like, go somewhere and stand or sit in one spot for like 15, 20 minutes and do nothing. Just hang out with your dog, let them see everything pass, let them do everything, take like food or treats that they would only ever get when you're doing this exercise, like something super high value that they get no other time, and like really reserve that for these moments. Go somewhere, every time something passes and they look at it and they don't, if your dog is having issues with like breaking commands or whatever, or reacting, if they don't react and they don't break command, give them a reward. Give them a jackpot reward as they look at you instead, even better. And just hold them accountable for their sitting and stuff. Even if that's as simple as you just have a slip lead or a prong collar or whatever you have on your dog, just put them back in position every time they break it. You know, there's a lot to be said for just persistence.
And patience.
And patience with stuff. Like, you don't have to be delivering like huge consequence, massive corrections for things like that. A lot of times it's just as simple as every time you get up, I'm putting you back in position.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna stop. You know, and we're going to do this for 20 minutes until you finally can settle in and relax and not care that all this stuff is going on.
And I think we've both, Michelle and I have both recently gotten puppies in, like very, very young puppies. And something I'm working on with Theo is that stillness. And we are not using e-collar at this stage. We're not doing heavy correction, but we are being very persistent and consistent with him getting off the bed, and at first he's like, this is awesome, screaming, barking, and then over the course of the hour that we're doing different things with him, we can see that mental state come down, and he's like, well, I know if I get off the bed, I'm just gonna get back on.
Yeah.
So it's just like teaching him, I'm just gonna relax. Yeah. And we start to see like, he's very focused, there's a session going on over here, he's very focused on that. And then he starts eating his feet, and he's just like, he's
always
just
like one thing to the next.
Yeah, and
like
then
an iPad
we're
kid.
starting to see that he's just like
literally
falling asleep.
Yeah,
like this is exactly what we want. We want him to be experiencing these things.
Yeah, they almost like go through a period of learning how to like self-soothe.
Yes,
you know, and like I did a ton of work with this with Snoop when he was young. I would do intentional periods of like having him, because like my philosophy with puppies is that I will die on the hill of how I raise my puppies, because I truly think it's a really good way to raise your dog. So I'll be a little biased, but my crate technique is like default is the crate, and if they're not in the crate, you have to give me a really good reason why.
Yeah.
And to me, one of my good reasons why that I do with my dog is intentional doing nothing. So like I remember with him, I had like a little X pen And then I put his bed in there with some blankets and stuff, and then I hooked a leash underneath like the leg of furniture or whatever, so he couldn't like jump on the sides of the X-Pen or do anything crazy. And I would just leave him in there. And I would watch, of course. He wasn't unsupervised, but, you know, he would go through periods where he'd be like, you know, doing the sad little whining because he wanted to get up and go do other things and stuff like that. And he had little chews and stuff in there and ways to keep himself busy. But I knew I wanted a dog who was very independent and that I didn't have to like micromanage all the time and keep entertained and like do all this stuff. And throughout the course of like a couple weeks of doing that, like, then it's like if I put him in there, I wouldn't have to use the leash to help him anymore. He'd go in, he'd grab his toy, he'd lay down on his bed, and he'd just do his thing. And I wouldn't have to, and it's not like I did it for long periods, like maybe 15, 30 minutes at the most. But it was really important for me to show him that you can exist in our world. Our other dogs can be doing other things. I can be doing other things. And you need to learn how to just do your own thing and just kind of hang out and not need to be involved in everything all the time.
It's also something to be said that it's normal for your dog to bark and whine.
Yes.
And just because your dog is barking and whining does not mean that something's wrong, that they need to come out of the crate, that you need to do something differently. You have to allow a period of time where they're going to lose their ever-loving minds in the crate. And not long-term. I'm not saying that that's appropriate for long-term. Yes, we want to correct it. But that is a stage. It's just like having a newborn baby and being like, why is it crying? Like, crying does mean something in the human world, but for dogs, sometimes they're like, this is BS.
Well, and it's them exploring what can I do to engage with my environment and how is it going to engage with me back with what I do, you know? And I think it's important to remember that with a human baby, like, babies, we take so long as humans to mature. Like, a baby's infant brain is so dramatically primitive that, like, yes, you live in a reactionary state sometimes to your infant because you have to, right? You have to go off of their cues. You don't have to live in reactionary states to a puppy, and you should not. Because they mature dramatically faster than a human. And so you can't infantilize a puppy because that is a dog. You are whatever you're doing with your puppy right now is what you're going to have as a dog later on. And so if you're constantly feeding into them and allowing their behaviors to dictate what you do instead of the other way around, then you're going to have a huge problem on your hands as far as like their behaviors long term and everything. That's why I'm such a big stickler for having such a predetermined structure when you have a puppy, because their whole day has to be planned. You have to know what you're doing with them, when did they go to the bathroom, all of that kind of stuff. You can't cue off of them for anything. Because when my dog is in the crate and he's screaming, I 100% know you do not have to go to the bathroom. You are not hungry. You are not thirsty, because I've done all of those things for you. We've done training, we've done playing, we've done exercise, we've done all of it. So right now, I'm just going to let you work this out. Because I know that's all that's happening right now, is it's just an emotional thing for you. And I need you to know that that is not how you're going to get my attention in any way. But if you're living in a reactionary state where you're waiting for your dog to whine or bother you to go to the bathroom or to do all these things, then you're looking at this creature with limited communication skills and being like, so this barking, does it mean they have to pee, poop, drink, eat? What does it mean? And that's just not going to be successful long term in that way at all.
So patience is important, persistence is important, and then making sure that distraction wise, like you said, like take them somewhere and just sit there for a little bit.
Yes.
So that's how I handle that. Do we have another question?
Yes, we do.
The next
one. Okay, next one is how to introduce reactive dogs to kids / new babies that haven't had any exposure to children.
Don't. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, emphasis on the word introduce. I would say your don't works perfectly if we're going by the true definition of that.
I'm dealing with this now with I had a very highly reactive dog and reactive to children and their movement. And she's like, well, how soon can I get the dog in with the children? So there's a little bit of work that we need to do before we get to that stage.
Yeah.
And that comes from the dog having a stronger relationship with the adult than they do with the children.
Mm-hmm.
And
also, what's the relationship of the kids? If the kids don't immediately live in your house, there's no point.
Sure.
They don't need to be around them at all. I would never.
Nieces and nephews, like it's not.
No.
Family gatherings, like allow yourself to enjoy being with your family without having to constantly manage your dog and be worried that if a kid makes like a sudden movement that your dog's gonna bite them.
Yeah.
And then having a fight with your family.
Yeah, what an awkward position to be in. Yeah, I mean if the children are not a permanent fixture in your life, then there's no need to. If they are a permanent fixture in your life, I think that, like, if you just had a baby and you have a reactive dog who already doesn't do well with kids, I think that there's, again, depending on the variables and the severity of the situation and all that kind of stuff, I think baseline, humans always have to come first. Mm-hmm. So the safety of your child needs to be the utmost importance. And if you decide that you're going to keep that dog in that house with that baby, you are now undertaking the dramatic responsibility of making sure that you are on top of things 100% so that nothing can ever happen. And I think that what that comes down to is really, really intense management and making really good, proper, safe choices. Like, there's absolutely no reason that even a baby coming home to live in the same house with a dog that they ever need to interact. Yeah. And I would advise against it. I don't think they need to at all.
Yeah. There's like I've mentioned this before, but there's like whole Instagram pages on how to have dogs and babies meet formally. Yeah. And I had a client come in for a follow-up recently that's going to have a baby, and they're just very clearly like very nervous about the interaction. And they're like, well, how do we do the big introduction? And I said, you don't. We should not pique the dog's interest by bringing home something from the hospital that smells funny. Like, that's not going to do anything, first of all. But then we shouldn't come in and like set the carrier on the floor and be like, look, Fluffy, we got a baby. Yeah. And then we're piquing the interest, the baby's crying, and then we can start to see that the dog's like up at feeding time and up with you during the night.
Too interested.
Yeah.
My dogs are not allowed to be interested. Like, if I had a child, they're not allowed to be interested at all. I mean, if I walked in the door with my new baby that I just got home with, and my dog comes over and is like nosing, they're getting a correction for it. And I'm not concerned in the slightest that that's going to make them like, they have a bad association with the baby. No. They just know that that's a boundary and you're not going to cross it. Yeah. And you stay away from my kid right now.
There's a lot of like this like thinking that it's just one introduction, and if it goes positively, then perfect, we're in the clear.
You're right.
And people are like, good, we got that over with, now they can be together, and my dog can actually take a shift with the baby and take him to the park. And it's like, dogs and children will work together with constant management from an adult, and you have to be there every step of the way. So the crawling stages, when the baby's grabbing things or going toward the dog's food, you have to be there to set the boundaries, and you can't assume that it's magically going to happen. Even if your dog is good with your children, you should still supervise.
Oh, 100%. Like, I have a dog that I'm okay being around kids. And I think, like, strangers' children, I don't see any point to it. Yeah. So I still with that. But, like, extended family or friends' kids or things like that, I'm fine with him being around. But I still am very firm about, like, if I see a kid going to hug him or lean on him, I'm like, nope, we're not doing that. Yeah. And I'm like very firm about my boundaries, and I don't mince words at all, and I don't try to be nice about it. I'm not rude. Yeah. I'm just like, nope, we're not hugging him. You can pet him like this, and I show them how or things like that. Because again, like, I don't want to ever put him in a position where he would be uncomfortable or whatever too. So
yeah, it's not fair sometimes to put your dog in positions that they're being like almost tortured by your kid. That's not funny. It's not cute. And you see like time and time again all these videos of babies interacting with children on the internet, and they're like, the dog like we've talked about is like whale-eyed, like very stiff, and they're like, oh, look, he loves it. And I'm like, Linda, I hate to tell you that your dog does not like that.
No. You can also use muzzles. I think that's obviously a good option and things like that. But I would say, like, without knowing the details of that situation, my first question would be like, is it an easily avoidable situation? Mm-hmm. And if so, just don't even do it.
Yeah.
If they live in your home, then if your dog is crate trained, perfect. If they're not, you need to teach them that, because you need the crate as a management tool, because you need mental breaks. You need breaks when the dog is away. You can relax and you don't have to like constantly micromanage everything. I think the age of the kids and stuff is important. I think it's easier to have dogs around infants and older children than children that are like a year and a half to like 5. I think that is probably the most difficult period, because kids are erratic and unpredictable, and you can try your best to instruct them on how they should interact with a dog, but kids are going to make mistakes and they're not going to be perfect all the time. And so I think while it's important to take into consideration that while a child is learning how to interact with a dog, they need to be around a dog who has a certain level of tolerance and grace. There needs to be room for them to have some room to grow and learn as well. So that's something to take into consideration, where kids need a little bit of help with that too, and that's our job. So that age period, it's important that you either have a kid who's really well versed in dogs, and then you can have a dog who's a little less well versed in kids, or the dog needs to be super well versed in kids, and the kid can be a little bit fresh and new. You never want new dog, new kid at the same time. I think that would be a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Next.
All right. This one's a little bit long.
Oh yeah.
We're ready.
Okay.
Angela.
So this one says, "Hi, I have a 2-year-old neutered mini Australian Shepherd. Some call them mini American Shepherds. He has a case of stranger danger. He does so well in public with paying attention to me and not being bothered by people. I can take him almost anywhere. My issue is, no matter how many bandanas or signs I put on my dog warning others not to pet, make eye contact, or talk to him, I'm sure you can guess that they still do. They baby talk him, stare at him, come into his space, and even try to reach out to him without even asking me. I have kids run straight up to him, and grown people that start reaching for him, probably meant growl, for him to even realize that what they were doing. My dog is becoming more and more fearful of people, even though I try to advocate for him. It started as a fear of men only, and now it's escalated to anyone, any gender, any age that he doesn't know. He will growl to warn them, then begin barking and lunging if they do not get the message." There's more, but it's...
So my immediate thought is that the no touching, I think, is a reasonable thing to enforce, but the no talking and the no looking, I mean, I think that if your dog is going to be out in public, they have to at least be able to be tolerant of that. Like people being like, what a cute little puppy dog, and stuff like that. As obnoxious as it is, and I wish people would stop doing that, because it's just unfair to the dog. I think that those things you probably that's a you thing that you have to work on and be able to kind of work your dog through those issues. But the no touching, I mean, with stuff like that, I think that maybe you need to be choosing better places to take your dog. If you're starting to see like a pretty drastic regression in their fear because they're constantly being bombarded, maybe pick places where you can get a little bit more space in between you and people.
Just initially,
initially, like maybe no more like indoor close quarters areas or things like that. Go to like parks or trails or things. And then, I mean, sometimes you just gotta be You gotta be firm
You
with
have to be
people.
very strong.
Like, I was saying in the last one, where like even with kids, like being nice leaves room for things to be misinterpreted.
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, I'm not outright going to be extremely rude to you,
No.
but I'm going to be very clear in what I'm saying. So like if you're like, oh my gosh, and I see you coming, I will immediately step in front of you and say, do not touch my dog.
Yeah.
Like, just like, so you cannot misinterpret that.
Yeah. You have to be very strong in those scenarios, because if you're truly advocating for your dog, I don't give a shit about people's feelings. Like, I need to prioritize my dog and have them know that I'm going to advocate for them.
Yeah.
Like, I was at the park the other day with a daycare dog, and then I could see a mile away this little baby running over to us.
Mm-hmm.
And I created the space, and the mom's like, stop, stop. And she's like, doggy. And I stood in front of her and I said, no petting. And she was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
She was very shocked that I had come off so strong.
Yeah.
And her mom's like, I am so sorry. And in those scenarios, like, if you're not going to walk with your child or those things, and children are coming up, it's going to be my job to protect my dog.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't care about your kid's feelings. I'm sorry to say that, and I hope that doesn't make me sound mean. But I care about their safety more than I care about their feelings.
Yeah, you know? No, absolutely. You just have to be very clear and firm and bold about your boundaries. There's none of this, like, if someone is immediately there and immediately a threat, not as in like a threat, but like a threat to crossing a boundary that you have with your dog, you don't have time for the, sorry, we're training, no, I'm sorry. We don't have time for that. All we have time for is, do not touch my dog. Do not. Absolutely not. And if you're working on your ability to be that assertive, and your dog is still struggling with people even just like looking at them or talking to them, then you probably need to go places where there's not going to be people immediately in your space.
Or go, like, something that I've been suggesting for some of my newer clients is go to parks or places a little bit earlier in the morning to avoid the crowd, so we're not right there at like the afternoon slot or the 4 p.m. slot, and allowing your dog to like create that space but still see people. So I might not go right on the same trail. I might kind of differ over into the grass a little bit.
Yeah.
And again, like we were talking about, allowing just some stillness and allowing the dog to see that. And if you have a cute dog, it's going to come with having a cute dog that people are going to want to pet.
Yes.
So we have to go into it prepared. Think of a sentence that you're going to say. So you're not scrambling at the last minute if you're a more passive, shyer person. Think like, if a kid comes up, I'm going to stand in front. My body language is going to say, stop, no petting. I'm just coming up with something to say. So
practice.
Yeah.
I'll have clients, like if I have a client in particular who really struggles with speaking up and like being assertive and they need to learn how to do it, I will make them do it in lessons. We will practice it. I will be the person that comes up and makes them uncomfortable, and they have to learn and practice, like, no, you can't pet my dog. And just sometimes just like vocalizing it and actually practicing it just makes it so much more muscle memory when it's the real thing.
And it can be hard. Like, I truly empathize with that. Like, finding your voice and advocating can be really difficult for people to even do for themselves. And then you feel like you're almost like a people pleaser. But for some of this stuff, it can be a really good lesson for you in growing as a person, to learn to say no, because you're completely in control of people approaching your dog. When it comes down to it.
I've had like clients come back after we've done those things, and they'll come back their next session and they're proud of themselves. They're like, I did it. They're like, this guy at the park, I did it. And so they get really, really excited. Did you say we would
sent you the end of it?
Okay.
She talks about something else.
Oh, cool. Yeah, let's read the rest of it.
I have yelled at people for not following my wishes. I have told them he will bite. I have been downright rude to them. I cannot seem to get through to people that my dog is not public property. I have thought about muzzle training him so that people might be more likely to stay away, but also do not want my poor boy and myself to get nasty looks and comments. Any suggestions? I am at my wit's end with dog lovers that know nothing about dogs. Thanks so much for your time and listening. I listen to your podcast all the time. Sincerely, Angela.
Angela,
We love you, Angela.
we appreciate you.
Hang in there. People
Yes.
suck sometimes. I mean, there's times where, like, so my shepherd, sometimes I will put his muzzle on for a walk just simply because I'm not in the mood and I want everyone to stay away from me.
Yeah.
Like,
I'd rather, yeah.
I'm not in the mood for it today. And, like, he doesn't need to be muzzled at this point in his life, but again, it's a deterrent. It's a natural deterrent. And I capitalize on that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind, you know? Stay away from me.
You gotta stop caring a little bit about like what people are thinking. Whether that's like, yes, I think muzzle training could be a good thing for this dog if he's really having these intense behaviors and you're worried about him biting, because that will remove a little bit of the fear from you as a handler and you as an owner, and you can go through situations being like, okay, I know he can't bite, so I have a little bit of time to slow down and think about my reactions to things without feeling like, oh my god, I have to act in a split second.
Yeah.
And then how people perceive the muzzle, just throw that out, because it's not important. If people give you nasty looks or look weird at you, brush it off, because they don't know what you're going through with your dog and they are not in your shoes, therefore they cannot judge you.
You have every right to occupy public spaces just as much as anybody else. And so it doesn't really matter what they have to say about it. You have every right to be there, and you're being responsible about it and trying to be and trying to do what's right for your dog. So you just can't care.
Yeah, and I've as a dog trainer, I've been doing professional training for about 4 or 5 years now, and I have only one time ever had somebody say something to me about a muzzle.
Really?
Ever. And it was a little boy, and he said, "Why is that dog in mouth jail?"
That is the best thing ever.
Yeah.
Mouth jail. I've never heard that before.
And
When
we're like,
kids,
well,
it is funny how kids will sometimes ask.
yeah.
My go-to response has always been so they can think with their brain and not with their teeth.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like people are gonna have their judgments about everything, and just like my dog's more important to me than how other people perceive me. So.
And like even walking around here, all the kids, their first question is always like, "Does that dog bite?" That's what everybody asks.
Yeah.
And my response is always, "Maybe."
Yeah.
And they're at a distance at that point, so the threat is not like imminent, or else I would be less ambiguous about it. But just saying maybe, you can see in their face, they're like, oh.
Or people,
Like,
people will ask like to pet your dog without asking to pet your dog, which can throw people off. So one is he friendly? And my answer is, no, he's in training right now, and I'm gonna address it immediately. Like, it's okay to say, even if your dog is friendly or your dog is working through something, it's okay to say like, no, he's not friendly.
That's true. You're right. They ask other questions when their intention is to say, "Can I touch it?
Yeah.
Can I touch your dog?"
If it's like friendly, people are like, and then that leads them to come closer near.
Or you can say like, if your dog is friendly and you want to say it, you could say like, "Yes, but you cannot pet them."
Yes. Yeah.
And immediately follow it with that, because that's obviously their intention by asking that.
Yeah, and like I was just thinking about this on the walk, like we probably all can agree that we get asked almost on a daily basis when we're working dogs in public, "Can I pet your dog?"
Yeah.
So there's so much practice, and it used to feel so uncomfortable to me and be like,
See, I've had the meanest dog for 10 years, so like I'm seasoned at this point.
Yeah.
And also like, don't also underestimate the value of no.
Yeah,
Literally just no. You don't have to say
that.
anything else. And then and I think also too, sometimes if somebody is ignoring your wishes and not listening, just get away from them. You know what I mean? Like, just completely create space and get away from them. You don't have to sit there and finish the conversation.
Yeah.
You don't have to entertain them. If they're like, "Oh, but my dog," I'm turning around and I'm walking away.
Yeah.
I don't have to stand here and keep talking to you. Like, there's no requirement for that.
It can be hard, and like Angela, I feel for you, but if we're constantly being in the same issue with people coming up, we may not be coming off strong enough. We may not be advocating enough if we're getting the same response over and over and over again. And I know that you said that you were like downright mean to people. And
but
yes,
is that after they've crossed the boundary or before? Because you might need to be meaner before they cross the boundary.
and just say no and then start backing up. And then not only is that words, but it is body language.
Yeah.
Sometimes people take a little bit longer to process a sentence.
Well, because people expect you to say yes.
Yeah.
They don't
they're
expect
like, can I
anyone
bet
to
out?
say
And
no.
then you're like, no. And they're like, oh.
I didn't expect that.
Yeah. Oh, and something to keep in mind too that I actually just ran into with some clients I have is that if you have multiple dogs, okay, and say, we don't recommend allowing people to pet your dogs on a leash, but you know, some people don't care, and if some people have dogs where that truly isn't an issue for them, and that's fine. But it's important to remember that if you have multiple dogs, and I think, Senni, you had a situation like this recently where you were like, well, I learned my lesson on that, where you're like, sure, you can pet this one, but you can't pet this one type of thing. Nobody's going to listen to that. No one's going to listen to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not going to listen to that. Because, like, if I have my Shepherd or my Chihuahua with me, which are two dogs that I don't let anybody pet ever, but I also have my Doodle. So my Doodle used to be a therapy dog. So he's, like, used to people petting him all the time, strangers on leash, all that stuff, and he's fine. So if I ever have him out and a little kid is like, oh, can I pet your puppy? And they're really polite about it, I'll usually be like, sure, because I know he'll be fine. But if I have either of my other two dogs with me, I still will say no, because I don't trust that they're gonna just pet him. And I don't want my other dogs to see somebody invading our space and touching him, and that cause an issue with them, and all of those other different dynamics. So it's important to keep in mind not only your dog, but maybe even if you're walking with a friend who has a dog that doesn't do well, or things like that, you need to keep in mind those situations and make sure you're setting appropriate boundaries in that context for them as well.
Yeah.
It's basically all about boundaries.
Yes. And recognizing, and I've I learned this in therapy, but I think it applies to a lot of things, is that whatever your own boundaries are, it is not, you can't rely on other people to hold your boundaries. That's not how boundaries work, and that's not why they exist. You have a boundary, and if somebody is not going to respect it, you are responsible for then taking steps to either enforce it or remove yourself from the situation. It's nobody else's job.
Sure. Yeah. And we can't just accept like, oh, well, I tried to get the person not to pet them. Oh, I tried my hardest. Like, I'm not going to let you pet my dog. And that's the bottom line. Like, one way or another, if I literally have to, like, scream at you and, like, kick you, if you're really being aggressive, like, you're making me feel unsafe at that point. And I've had men do that. I've had men come up to me and completely not listen to me. And I've had to, like, scream at them in public. Yeah. Like, you're making, I feel unsafe at that point.
No, yeah, absolutely. You have to be very firm with people sometimes.
So, Angela,
say it a little bit louder next time.
Yeah.
You hear me that time? Okay.
Oh, man. Do we have other ones? We have what, 2 more, I think?
Yeah.
We probably have time. We'll be speedy.
Okay. What is the best way to help my dog with her fear of loud noises? She's terrified of fireworks, and it has now evolved to a fear of motorcycles and loud cars. She will freeze and shake the moment it happens. If we are walking, she will lay down and refuse to move. How can we work through it without stressing her too much?
I think having a really good, like going back to having a foundation of training and starting to set some expectations. Always like building that in the house first. So we're doing some leash work, we're working on her heel, and then eventually once we, at least how I would handle it, once we set an expectation like the heel position, we can start going outside a little bit and doing a little bit of exposure there, where even if a car backfires or something happens, I'm still going to give the correction for something that is a known behavior, like a known obedience behavior. So if you dart in front of me because a car backfires or something goes off, I'm still going to correct you and get you back so we can walk together and we can hold you accountable for that. And that's not necessarily going to take the fear out of it, because we can't directly train a dog not to have a feeling, but we can work through it.
Yeah, I think that it depends on how extreme the response is when they're fearful. So, like she was saying, if it's like a bolting, flighty response, which it sounds like this dog, it's just like they freeze. So it's a little bit less intense, but like, yeah, bolting, flighty stuff, like I instantly suppress at least that coping mechanism, because I just want to take that off the board of like, you can be scared, but you can't try to run away, because that's just a safety issue at that point. But with, and then you can go into like counter conditioning stuff. Like I think, was it Toaster who was like freaked out by cars and stuff when he first started?
And bikes.
And I was having to use like food and stuff a lot on the walks every time like one would pass.
Yeah.
So like, if your dog, it's hard because when they enter like a fear state, a lot of times they don't want to eat. So sometimes you have to go back to do counter conditioning, which I truly think is the best option to make a dog a little bit more confident and less fearful about things. You do have to take a few steps back to where they're still going to be willing to do something they like to do, whether that's like play, because some dogs play is super powerful, or take food, like really high value food. And every time, say like in the car instance, like with her dog Toaster that she adopted now, anytime a dog or a car would go by, he would literally like salamander and just like crawl on the ground.
Or would literally like bump into my legs and almost trip me.
Yeah, and so what we ended up doing with him was obviously initially correcting like the darting stuff, but then once that was under control, anytime a car went by, no matter what he did, as long as it wasn't running away, we would give food. Because it was less about, I'm less worried about what he's physically doing in that moment and more about the mental perception he has of cars. So the food is more about creating a positive association with the thing more than it is about what he's physically doing. So sometimes people get caught up on, oh, you're rewarding them for crawling on the ground. And I'm like, no, I'm trying to get him to understand that through classical conditioning, when a car shows up, he gets like cheese and he loves cheese. And you can start to create stuff like that. So with like thunder and fireworks, every time there's a boom, they get food. Boom, they get food. Boom, they get food. And then all of a sudden you have a dog that they hear it, and they're like, oh, that wasn't bad at all, you know, because it biologically creates a different response to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of an idea that we should completely shelter our dogs from fireworks. Around 4th of July, I'm sure people are calling their vets, can I get a prescription for trazodone? Can I get this? Well, let's put them in the basement, put blankets over them, or thunderstorms happen, and we're like, how can I make you the most comfortable? And sometimes you have to allow your dog to perform some of these behaviors and set boundaries, like, yes, like I can't train you to feel immediately better, but I can train you crawling on the couch with me and crawling into my skin, and that pacing that some dogs perform, or the bolting. We can set the expectation through some of our obedience commands to kind of calm the physical body. And once the physical body is kind of stationary, we can then work on, like you said, like classical conditioning and getting food. And we don't have to shelter our dogs from absolutely everything. Like going back to like raising a puppy, I got Pip in, I don't even remember, March or something. And by 4th of July, instead of being like sheltering her from the fireworks, we were out walking when the fireworks were going off.
Snoop was asleep. I got him in March of the year he was born. And then again in July, Snoop was asleep on the couch and with me, and then the fireworks starting off, and I literally woke him up, took him outside, and we did like just a fun game with treats while the fireworks were going off, and he didn't care at all. And like, could I have probably skipped that because biologically, like, he's just this very sound, confident dog? Probably, but I didn't want to risk it, you know? So I was like, we're gonna do this and get you super pumped about fireworks and everything, and he's never had any issues since. And I do think there is something to be said that like, there's certainly a genetic component to it. Like some dogs are just never scared of stuff like that, and some dogs just are.
Yeah.
And there is, I think, a certain glass ceiling that you can hit when it comes to fear of like big noises like that, because there's only like, you can't really, I would say realistically, take a dog who's like trying to burrow behind your washing machine to a dog who's like unfazed by the fireworks. That's probably impossible, but you can certainly make it a lot less alarming and stressful for them if you take the proper steps to do it.
Yeah, like I'm working with Sally right now, who's just scared of her own shadow, like a napkin on the ground, like the end of the world for her.
Yeah.
So in one of our sessions, we set up something that was really scary for her, is just passing objects. We got like the Christmas present lights out, mop bucket, and we set the expectation prior. She'd been 7 sessions by now, the heel position, and we had her walk. And just because she was passing objects that startled her did not mean that I was going to allow her to bolt or perform inappropriate behaviors. So we started to notice the confidence in the command when she was like, oh, I've passed this several times and it's not doing anything, and I know I gotta hang out with you. But that's not necessarily a dog that you could have off leash when fireworks are happening, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right, let's hit this last one.
Okay.
I think this is the puppy biting one.
For a 10-week-old puppy, what to do about biting/nipping? Correct, ignore, how to correct.
10-week-old. I think the age is important.
10-week-old,
I wouldn't really worry about it. Here's the thing with my puppies is like, I tend to like some of it is intuition, which is hard because people want really like hard and fast rules for things. I get it. But like some of it, and also like what you want from your dog and your puppy, I think is important to keep in mind too. But like some of it, I think, is just feeling the vibe behind what's going on and addressing it in the appropriate way. So what I mean by that is like, if your dog is just having a good time, there's definitely a difference between a dog who's being disrespectful and a dog who's just like having fun.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, and it's like, I don't know. I think, so let me collect my thoughts. Puppies are like my favorite thing. I'm very passionate about raising puppies because I think it's awesome. I love doing it. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I wish I could skip the puppy phase. That's like my favorite phase. I love it, everything about it, because they're just these like little balls of clay that you can turn into whatever you want. But I again think that if you follow my crating technique and having your day planned and you are fulfilling all of your puppy's needs, and you only have them out of the kennel when you are intentionally doing something with the dog and you're prepared for whatever it is you're doing, 90% of your demand behaviors like biting, barking, nipping, all of that are just not going to exist anymore.
Yeah.
I don't think they will. And I've had a laundry list of clients that have these issues, and as soon as they change their routine to what I set it up to with the crating and stuff, come back the next week and they're like, they just don't do it anymore. Because they don't have like the option to.
Yeah.
A lot of times if your dog is biting and nipping at you, it's because they want your attention because you're doing something else, which is exactly why they just shouldn't be out when you're doing other things.
Yeah.
They don't need to be out at that point.
Adding a little bit more structure. And then like, again, bringing back to Theo, who's the puppy, did a lot of biting. He's a little bit older.
Yeah.
And it would just be like in our training sessions, like he'd be biting a lot. And one thing that we did is a leash correction. And that is just kind of giving a leash pop when they go to bite it. And it's meant to kind of interrupt the behavior in the moment. And they're like, whoa. Additionally, you could get a pet corrector. And the softest way to do it is simply stop interacting with your dog when they're performing those behaviors.
Yeah.
So if they're really biting me, and it's manageable obviously, and they're not latching on, we're done playing for that minute. We're done interacting. But a lot of people have it, I think, during the playtime and where to set the boundaries at that time.
I think it's important too to think of what dog did you get? Like one of my good friends, she got with Binks that came to like our training session
Binks.
that one night. Binks is like a dock diving star these days now.
Aww.
She's so grown up. But when Binks was really young, she was really concerned. And this was like her first time raising like a very high drive dog. I think Binks is like border collie, cattle dog mix. And so she asked me a lot of questions in the beginning because she was like, I want to do it right. I want to know what is a concern. What can I let slide? What do I need to let slide to build drive? You know, all those different things. And she was really concerned for a while because she was like, she bites me like crazy. Like when we're playing, she just wants to like bite me and all this kind of stuff.
Sure.
And there's certainly ways to like, and I showed her some stuff on how to like redirect back to toys and kind of manage it a little bit more. But honestly, like, I wasn't too concerned about it because those dogs just bite. And yes, you have to teach them how to channel it appropriately and stuff, but like, you also have to keep in mind what kind of dog you got. You know, if you got like a golden retriever and a lab, a border collie, a cattle dog, whatever, they bite. That's just, they're very oral dogs. That's biologically in them to bite things, pick things up, carry things around, constantly have stuff in their mouth. So you also have to have a little bit of patience for some puppy antics. I think that you have to be able to roll with the punches a little bit and be like, oh my gosh, god damn, that hurt. And then just be like, okay, well, moving forward, you know what I mean? Like, puppies are gonna do shit like that. And I think that being too hard and too strict on a puppy can have some negative repercussions later on because you're just stifling the joy that they have. That's again another reason I love working with puppies is because everything is so new and exciting and fun for them that it's like you need to allow them to express that to a certain degree. Again, I think that it's good to be mindful of when you can tell a puppy is doing something disrespectfully and in like defiance or conflict of whatever you're doing, and there's certain things I won't tolerate, and leash corrections are a good way to work on that, or simply persistence. So like if I was handling a puppy and they started getting mouthy because they didn't want me to hold their paws or do something, I'm just not going to let go. I'm not even going to correct. I'm just not going to let go. And then maybe once they calm, I'll even give them food for it. You know what I mean? And kind of go about it that way, like little Ivy that came in. They said that the vets told them to talk to their trainer, actually, which I thought was great. That Ivy had a little bit of trouble with handling, where she was getting a little growly at times and stuff like that, with them maneuvering her and to work on it. So I did a lot of that in the lesson. And yeah, she was real like bitey and mouthy and stuff. And then eventually she was just like, where's my treat? And then she was fine. So at that age, specifically 10 weeks old, like Mia was asking about, I think that I don't think you need to do any corrections. I think you just need to do a little bit of ignoring, but also some persistence. Like if we're playing and then the dog switches to your hand, everything is boring and dead. I will leave, I'm not moving my hand away. I will leave my hand there. They're going to keep going, and then eventually they're going to die out and be like, well, this is not fun at all anymore. And as soon as they let go of my hand, boom, the toy keeps going and it's super, super fun again. If they switch over to my hand, all of a sudden it's dead again. So their association with biting human is like boring. But playing with the toy, it stays really, really fun and engaging at that point. And shaping that from that really, really young age is probably the best option. And then beyond that, unless you're in play doing something, the dog shouldn't be out or in a position to do it to you otherwise for attention or demanding or whatever it is. Because if you're not actively doing something with your puppy, they just need to be in their kennel.
I hear that a lot, like with pet dogs that like aren't sporting or aren't trying to teach their dog things. They see that puppy biting with their children, and again, it comes back to you have to be there to supervise it. And then we see it time and time again. The puppy will bite, and people like grab the puppy's snout and like scream at it in their face. And that, you know, can be very alarming to a dog. But why are we putting them in positions where they're allowed to get super aroused with our kids? And start that biting. if they're starting to do that, we're gonna remove the puppy from the situation. We're gonna kind of calm down. Or in that moment, as we've said, we can offer a leash correction, which is just putting a leash on and kind of like popping it, whether that's with the prong if you're using it at that stage, or just like their flat collar or slip lead.
Well, and dictating how your kids interact with your dog is a massive part of successfully raising a puppy with young kids, because, and I'm not saying that your kids can't be kids with the dog around. 100%. Your kids should be able to run, scream, play, do whatever they want. And the dog, it is your job to do intentional, we are going to sit here, settle, and observe, and not need to engage and run and chase after the kids. But when the kids are like, I want to come say hi to the dog, okay, that's fine, but we are not roughhousing. We're not chasing the dog. We're not running with the dog. The inner energy between the kids and the dog needs to be calm. Kids cannot interact with puppies and be crazy and it not go bad.
Yeah, because like a puppy naturally is going to look at a child as their playmate, especially if like wrestling and roughhousing, and inevitably they're gonna use their teeth. And it's not necessarily fair for us to go in and be like, no,
because if you don't want your dog, your puppy, to see your kids as a toy, then you can't allow your kids to see the dog as a toy.
Yeah.
It goes both ways. You have to teach your kids, and I think setting that precedent right off the bat of like, we interact with the dog respectfully teaches them right off the bat that this is not something to entertain you. This is not a fun new toy that you have or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I think it's just being picky about how you're interacting with your puppy, when you're interacting with your puppy, management beyond that. Because at 10 weeks old, I mean, you shouldn't have to correct for that stuff. You should be able to just shape it in a more appropriate way. Like Snoop he's never had an issue with play biting, because I think I was so micromanagey about him and when he was out and what we were doing and stuff like that, that he just never kind of had the opportunity for it.
Yeah.
Well, cool, guys.
Yeah. Thank you for the questions.
Yeah, that was fun.
If you like this, feel free to ask more, and we can like kind of work into some of our podcasts as answering questions.
Yeah, we can like collect a few over time and do another one like this.
Yeah.
Senni, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You're the best question reader.
Thanks.